while the other remained dark and tangled and wild. Wind, maybe, or something to do with the elevation. Or chance. They descended into a valley. Another creek churned deep and wide across their path. They crossed without incident and climbed what should have been the last major ridge. Andy's boots slurped and squelched until a misjudged step along the crest. Loose dirt, maybe. Andy slid to the canyon's belly, stopping when his back slammed into something metal. The impact of his body slamming into two steel barrels knocked one over, and Andy heard a popping sound. He pushed himself up and slid his pack off. His ankle hurt, but otherwise nothing was broken, he decided, and turned to get a better look at what had stopped his fall. Before Elise found him, he had a good 2 minutes to stare, agape, at what had slipped out of one of the barrels. A woman's bare arm stretched out from the black hole. How he could tell it was a woman's arm and not a man's, he couldn't say. He forced his jaw closed. "It's a mannequin, right?" he said when Elise arrived, clambering down after Andy. But she knew, right away, even if Andy didn't. Andy tried to stand, but his ankle wouldn't hold his weight. They decided he would stay with the barrels, while she went for help. Elise's figure disappeared through the woods. He propped his pack under his ankle, an indigo firework exploding under his skin. Now that he had stopped moving, his sweat-soaked shirt clung to him as though someone had poured a glass of ice-cold water down his back. He settled in with his back pressed against the nearest tree. The afternoon sun rotated above the canyon, eating fistfuls of trail mix when his growling stomach demanded attention. He passed the afternoon waiting. When the sun slid behind the western ridge, another arm, or the sensation of another arm, cupped his shoulders, the way his older sister used to do to comfort him when they sat on the top step of the house they grew up in, listening to their parents fight in the kitchen. Their 4 bare, knobby knees like marbles knocking as they waited to see how it would end. Andy didn't move, afraid the arm, or whatever it was, would leave. Or worse, that whoever it belonged to would grow angry. All afternoon, the surrounding brush had scented the clearing with earthy pine. As the sun sank, florals replaced the pine. He scanned the ground. If there were flowers here, he couldn't see them. He stopped waiting for Elise to return and began fearing what would happen if she didn't. The evening air tore at his exposed skin like the blade of a serrated knife. The floral scent intensified, filling the air with noxious perfume. In the wind, Andy heard children's laughter. His attention was split between listening for laughter, telling himself it was crazy, there weren't children out here, and watching the barrel, half expecting the lifeless woman to crawl out. Later, when he read that the remains were skeletonized, he would swear that couldn't be right. He had seen a woman's bare arm, hadn't he? 30 years later. Laura. Laura MacDonald had gotten used to being naked, but this was a bit much. For the last 10 minutes, she'd watched as Dr. Fissaro walked back and forth along the long corridor, separating 2 rows of beds in the surgical bay. His hard-soled shoes tapped the floor in rhythm with his staccato Italian as he chattered to himself. Laura had wanted to call out, "I'm right here," but didn't. Maybe he had another patient to check on. When Dr. Fissaro did find her, the anesthesia attending had been in the middle of introducing his team. He was standing with a resident and 2 surgical nurses when Dr. Fissaro entered, closing the privacy screen behind him, the metal rings screaming along the curtain rod. "Pull down your gown, please," Dr. Fissaro said. Not so much as a nod of acknowledgement to the people who would keep her alive while he cut and sewed. The anesthesia attending stood frozen in mid-sentence. Laura hesitated. Showing your breasts to one doctor was one thing. This was another. The seconds it took her to untie her gown were an eternity. While she stared at the ceiling, Dr. Fissaro scrawled dashes across her chest with a thin-tipped permanent marker, pausing to take a step back, examine his work, and make a few more. The others kept their eyes on the floor.